And this one I think is also pretty interesting because we were talking a little bit about things that or people who have lost in this situation. And we talked about sports bettors. We talked about freelance combat sports writers. And obviously we've talked about fighters, but there's a specific group of fighters who have been in a tough situation as this, how this in this particular situation. And it's the fighters who had huge fights lined up, signed, sealed. I'm not talking about just discussed. I'm talking about agreed upon fights.
Biggest purse of their lives.
Biggest purse of their lives. Fighters who are good fighters, championship level fighters, but who haven't had that stage or platform yet to really maybe elevate themselves. And so, I mean, we're going to talk to somebody in a second who can speak directly to that. But I want to hear some of your thoughts on that, Peter, because even some people in your camp may have been approaching that space.
Absolutely. And look, there are fighters of all levels, but, one that sticks out, and, before we get into our guest, one that sticks out is Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez was supposed to fight Victor Postal. He was supposed to fight Victor Postal in China when this whole thing started in China with the coronavirus. That got postponed. That was then going to get moved to May 9th in Fresno. That got postponed. And, this was going to be probably a career high because what was going to happen is originally, and see, this is how the domino effect really takes place. He was going to fight Postal. With all things, considered, he was the favorite. He beats Postal. He then moves on to fight Josh Taylor. And that would have been the biggest fight of his career and the biggest payday of his career. And everything was just set up for him. Well, none of it's happened now.
Right.
And not only has none of it happened, but there's just no tentative date for it to pick back up. And then, the question is, do they go back and do they fight the Postal fight? Does Taylor fight who he was going to fight? Do they just go and fight each other? Do they try to make up for lost ground? In the meantime, fighters spend money in camp. Look, we could take it back to the UFC fighters. All these guys that just put in time, money, preparation in advance of these fights are getting nothing.
Yeah. Paying nutritionists who still got to get paid.
Everybody.
Because they gave you money, because they gave you food.
Right. It's just, across the board. And so, even in my own camp, I had George Kambosos Jr. fighting a very meaningful fight on May 9th, which was against Lee Selby for the IBF Eliminator. And the reason that's important is because the winner of that fight would have become the mandatory for Teofimo Lopez for that IBF title, which theoretically means that the winner of Lomachenko Lopez would have been forced to fight the winner of Kambosos Selby for that lightweight, for that IBF title, if they wanted to keep that title. So the point is that, it has an effect from the top to the bottom, but a lot of guys have lost income, and it's now going to take, remember, this isn't like most other sports.
Right.
When this ramps back up and they say, okay, boxing resumes. Look, DAZN just came out yesterday and basically said they've put all boxing on hold until July.
Yep. And they also said that they would freeze their subscriber bases, memberships.
Right.
But they were going to work hard to still put content up.
Right. So, the point that I'm making is that if a fighter has a fight that's, say, scheduled now for, let's just say they say, okay, in July, we're all able to get back at it. Well, these guys we've talked about it before, they need a good 6 to 8 week training camp, especially now that they haven't been in the gym as consistently. So you're talking, September before some of these guys get back in the ring.
Yeah, and some of them may have to work off some of these Corona calories. So,
and they're not getting paid salaries.
No.